So our next presentation is going to be on a day in the life of a task force leader. Our two presenters are both blue team folks also. We have Scott Stutzman. He is an ops chief with me on the blue team. And we have Mark Corliss. He's a div soup on the blue team. And they both have extensive wildland experience before they went into the structured community.
Good afternoon, everybody. Mark Corliss, like Andy said, I work for Clackamas Fire. They talked about a lot of this stuff already before us, so fuel up your task force prior to the initial check-in. You know, have a general idea of what's going on with your task force. Know your capabilities. If you got people that are in trainee positions, you know, that's something that's important for the division to know so they can try to plug you guys in, especially if it's a person sitting next to you in that task force leader rig. And we're talking to you, but your trainees here are supposed to be doing all that stuff. Those are important things. When we go to briefings, you want to make sure that you're ready to go as soon as that briefing's over. So the people on the line are waiting for you to come out to relieve them, and then it's going to flip over in 12 hours for the same thing. And so if you're dragging your feet in the morning, the people at night are going to start dragging their feet on you. So
I think what's important also, just one thing to add is on those first impressions is as a task force leader, keeping your task force together, just like as Mark was talking about, is going up, finding and making contact with your division soup if you know who that is at that time. But and that can happen as soon as resource, or you check in with the resource unit leader, is really seeking that division soup out if you can, introducing yourself and keeping the task force together. Those are just some first impressions that I had as a division soup. If I was looking at a task force leader and saw their task force ready to go, sitting at the ready by their equipment, that to me was a really good first impression. It made me go, okay, I know where that task force is, and once we're ready to give an in-brief or anything like that, or I needed to get in touch with them, I knew right where to go, and I knew who that task force leader was. I think a big part of the first impression is and much of wildland fire, as we're bouncing from incident to incident, is that rapid team development. You guys may work with each other in your own county. You may even know other people from networking, such as classes and conferences, but a lot of people don't know one another. And so by going out there and introducing yourself and making that forward point to go say, hey, this is who I am, or I'm the task force leader of this task force, and here's some of our capabilities. It goes back to kind of the task force strike team leader class that we all took, but understanding your task force's capabilities and really understanding them, and don't oversell them, but don't undersell them, because the truth will come out. But that first impression, that's a big deal, and building the team rapidly and having a good relationship with the division soup is only going to get you possibly better assignments, but also it's going to establish a comfort zone with one another. All right.
So the other thing, first impressions are great, but you can have a great first impression in camp, but if the division soup or the ops chief beats you to the line, it's probably not the second impression you wanted to make. So just those are some things that we want you guys to be thinking about. And you're the influence on your entire strike team task force. So if you're leading by example, just like we're all supposed to lead by example, you guys are going to portray that to them, and so they're going to know that they're going to have to kind of kick it in gear if they're dragging their feet.
So chain of command is really important. Not only within your task force itself, but as far as knowing who you're working for and with. I just talked about those introductions, which are important, but also understanding, and you're seeing a few of us here that are on the IMTs, is putting faces to names, and we're doing the same with you guys right now. So when I walk up and being on previous deployments, I meet somebody, I'm likely to go up to them and say hello right off the bat, and so you're creating those relationships. You're going to find the chain of command. I know for a number of years it would be like I'd show up to briefings and I'd go, okay, there's the ops chief, or that was our division supervisor, and I may see the division supervisor once every 3 days because they were covering so much ground, and I never had an opportunity to meet them. I'd see them at the morning operational briefings, and that was it. But as far as at your guys' level now, understanding who you work for and where to go even above them and the jobs that they're doing is really important. You can find these, like we put on here, the ICS 203. That way you can see the whole organization or the organization chart on the ICS 203 and look at other divisions, maybe neighboring divisions. A lot of times we go out, or more times than not, we go out as group, or our divisions are really group supervisors out there, so you're bouncing different divisions. And so having an understanding of what those division supervisors look like and their names is really important.
Just to touch base on that a little bit, we all are State Fire Marshal affiliated, and there's 99% of the time there's another team, another team that's there. And so it's not always good for you to know the supervisor that you're working for, but the other division that you're in, other task force strike team leaders, so you guys can work together to accomplish the mission. So those are all faces that you want to meet, and a good place to do that is at briefing or on the line. So
we'll talk about the incident action plan here in a couple of minutes. The part under here on that you don't work for, or safety doesn't work for you guys, we talked about earlier, that they work for, obviously the line safety works for the safety officer and is part of the command staff. But, and I think, I just want to say or reiterate, there's really a partnership out there, and so utilizing the line safety officers is a benefit. They're out there for your guys' safety, for the safety of the operation, and so I can't stress that enough. Is talking with them and having a relationship with the safety officer.
there are times, when it gets busy, and whoever was at County Line 2 last year might realize the safety officers sometimes jump in and help, and that's completely appropriate. They're all qualified at the division level. There are times that that's going to happen. Not a big deal. Just make sure you follow up. Hey, so-and-so's trying to give me these orders. Is that fine? And it probably, for the most part, is. All right, meals, equipment, mission ready. We're all used to that again. Same department. So just make sure that you're mission ready at all times. And if that situation changes, make sure your supervisor knows that it changed. Whatever reason the reason is. Even Mariah was talking about the wet rate. If you come into camp and you're not mission ready because you hit a deer or whatever, not a big deal. Just let us know, and we'll get somebody to take care of that and charge it to your district. But if something happens on the fire, all that stuff needs to go on the 214, and it needs to be documented, and the supervisor has to know about it. So for the most part, we go to places where there's shopping centers and stuff like that where you can get dinner, but there are occasionally we go to places that you can't get food. So bring your MREs and your water and all that business. So.
Yeah, I think just one thing to add on meals and equipment checks is just like Mariah covered, the getting the apparatus and the people to the incident. Once you're on the incident, it's your time to document that if anything gets broken or chips in the paint or anything like that, get documented to get fixed. But it's also, what I want to say is there are times that you guys are going to be busy that your task forces aren't. And typically that's either later in the evening after you guys come in from the field or before you go out to shift work in the morning. And so one of the things as that practice that I've used in the past is you get up and you have your breakfast, you go to your ops briefing, and that's a really good time to have your crews do checks on the vehicle, gather the lunches, make sure that they're mission ready so that when you come out of the briefing, and we'll talk about the ops briefing here in a minute, but that they're ready to go, and you're peace of mind that the task force is put together. There aren't any deficiencies that you're unaware of, and you guys can take off out into the field. So that's a good time to do it. When you come back in from camp, usually I always made it a standard practice to have everything fueled up and like Mark was saying, mission ready the night before, just in case something were to happen overnight and we were in a position where we had to wake up a task force to go help. Maybe there were structures threatened. You guys are maintaining that operational readiness at all time, and that just doesn't include the vehicle, right? That includes, I mean, the hand tools, that the tanks, the water's topped off, that obviously it's fueled, but chainsaws are sharpened and everything's ready to go. And I know the last thing that crew members want to do is they get in from the fire line and they want to spend another hour or whatever cleaning up their tools, but they'd rather just grab some food and either go to bed or talk to their friends. But it's really important that they maintain that readiness, that you're overseeing that, and that the task force is ready to go.
So quick question. This is just a broad question. Anybody can answer. Like in the first slide, the fire camp situation shouldn't be a surprise to anybody at this point. But where, if you need a drip torch or drip torch fuel, who do you go through for the fire marshal team to get that? Resource unit? Logistics, maybe? Do we go right to the fire camp that's set up by the other Type 2 team? Or do we go through the fire marshal's office to get stuff? Fire marshal, right. And go through your division, and if you can't find us, it's fine. Just go to the logistics, and they'll get you set up with whatever you need.
No, I think it's really good to definitely to talk about that and to understand the difference between we've talked about the two teams, and so you've got the fire marshal's team that's there, and what we want to do is we want to run everything from our group, from our organization, through the fire marshal side, and I think that's important to understand. There are some things that you can go straight to the agency cash trailer and get or supply, but work through your div soup if you have a question on that, or the fire marshal's logistics.
Yeah, there's some consumables that are just we're paying for anyway. So batteries, things like that, water, all that stuff you can just pick up. But just if you have questions, just go through the logistics or ask your division. So.
And also, I think it'd be fair is as a task force leader. I don't know how many of you have had the opportunity to sign out gear, but once you check that gear out, you also have to check it in. So you want to be accountable for that. And kind of the big thing too is hose. When we go out and we're engaged in fire and maybe a section of hose gets burned up, they might be able to replace that, or at least give you a loaner right there out of the fire cache. But you need to turn that back in, and then obviously fill out the paperwork to get it replaced once you get home.
And don't forget to mark down numbers for like Mark III pumps and stuff like that when you check them out.
That's right.
Because if somebody steals one and you don't know which number it was, it's kind of a pain. So.
All right, the planning P. We're gonna get into the planning process. One of the things that we wanted to include in this portion of the presentation is you guys go out to work and do an incredible amount of work and great work out there. But what's really going on back at camp? And so I don't know how many of you have had the opportunity to either sneak in camp or maybe you drove by camp and you're like, oh, that looks like a pretty good deal. Those guys are just walking around. They're just hanging out. But that really couldn't be further from the truth. Anybody who's taken an ICS class, and I imagine everybody here has. So by the time we usually get there, I mean, it could be right at the very late stages. It's really dependent. I'm not going to say by the time every time, because we've arrived during the initial attack and have stayed through the extended attack when the teams get ramped up. But usually that first operational time or ops period that we get there is really confusing. People are still trying to figure out what's going on, and parts of teams are getting to the fire, and so the team isn't more times not established at that point. But the tail of the P there, we're usually getting in where we're going to either be working with an ODF team or a Forest Service team, or I guess an agency team. I'll just refer to them as an agency team. And the Fire Marshal's team will come in and we'll unify with them. And we'll get there. The ICs will get together and they'll meet and talk, and then they'll have their briefing with the agency administrator and the initial IC and try to get any updated information. That's when command and general staff are there, and then we usually have an opportunity to ask some questions. And then they go off and and establish objectives. So at the ICs, or once the ICs meet with the agency administrator, they'll create the objectives, and then we'll all meet at the Command and General Staff meeting and review the objectives, talk about any concerns through each section, and then we'll go into preparing for a tactics. A lot of the initial portion of the planning P on that first planning cycle is gathering situational awareness. We're out where division soups are out there getting information from the layout of the land, the firefighters who are out there, and we're putting together kind of a needs thing and what we're going to go through as far as putting together our division assignments and how we want the layout of the fire to go. When we go into the tactics meeting, we're reviewing that. That's where we look at how many people have heard of the 215 and the 215A. That's when we'll lay the plan out on that, see if everybody can support it, and then go into the planning meeting. Obviously, I'm accelerating this a little bit, but the planning meeting is everybody's. Usually, the plan is solidified, and there shouldn't be any big concerns at that point. For the most part, everybody's bought off on it, with the exception of the ICs, and it's the opportunity for the Command and General Staff to present the plan to the ICs, and with their permission, then the planning meeting the plan's accepted. If it's not accepted, then we've got to go back to kind of that tactics meeting and start reviewing the parts that the IC didn't agree with. But the planning meeting is complete after everybody approves it, and then it goes into to bringing all the pieces of the incident action plan together. We have anywhere, depending on the ops period, from overnight to have the IAP printed out, or if it's a 12-hour ops period, then it's more of a condensed time frame, and we'll have maybe an hour or two to get it printed out and then be available for you guys at the operational briefing. The ops briefing, if you think about it, is an information dump of kind of information that we know. It's the plan. It's got the objectives in it, the safety message, the 204s, which are specific to maybe your division that you're working, or your group assignment, and in there you'll have some special instructions and things. The ops briefing is usually for day ops is 6 o'clock in the morning, depending on what the ICs want as far as a time frame, and if we're working off of a 24-hour ops period or a 12-hour ops period. If it's a 24-hour ops period, it's usually there's plenty of time to review the plan, to talk to everybody, make a lot of meetings, and get it prepared for the next day. If it's a 12-hour ops period, everything's accelerated, and it becomes really difficult to meet all the meetings and to get everything assembled correctly, and it just is more manpower conducive. And then it starts all over. So on the briefings and meetings, for the ops briefing, if everybody should attend the ops briefing, or I guess not everybody should attend, but it allows room for everybody to attend the ops briefing. It's not a time to ask questions, but it's a time that you're listening to Command and General Staff, maybe agency administrators will get up and talk, the ICs will talk, and any special dignitaries will get up and say a few words if they'd like to. But it's a information for you guys to listen, and you can follow along in the IAP as the ops briefing is taking place. Task force leaders and engine bosses are required to attend. So those are the big ones. You guys and then your engine bosses, definitely have them come. And why they're there, or while you're at the ops briefing, that's a great opportunity for the crews to get their engines squared away again and meals ready.
Yeah, I think it's really important for everybody to be there if you can. If all of that other stuff is done, like Scott was just talking about, if your lunches are all good and your rig's ready to go from the night before, If everybody can hear that same message, the message is consistent all the way through, and you don't have to break down later in the day and have another briefing out on the line. So if you get that information from the IC and from everybody else, and you get leader's intent from everybody, you know what the ops chief plan is, and everybody knows what everybody's doing on the line, you don't have to have those conversations multiple times throughout the day. So I think going to that ops briefing is really important for everybody to be at if possible. Sometimes the dinner line's long or the breakfast line's long, and you need to get lunches and stuff like that, so not all crew members can make it, and we get that. But like Scott said, task force leaders and engine bosses for sure are a minimum.
Let's see, and then going back to what Mark just said, so the division or group breakouts, how many people have been a part of the breakouts? And that usually occurs after the ops briefing is the planning section chief who's running the briefing will say, Division Alpha here, Bravo Charlie, and so forth, structure protection group over here. And that's a time for you guys to get together with your division soups or your group supervisors, and they'll go over any information that they have pertinent to the day. Maybe if you guys have questions or concerns, that's the time to bring them up. And it's kind of like that last chance before you go out on the line to really get some questions and answers taken care of. Many times on maybe a hot check-in, when we come in and we're deploying you to the line, we'll give you the an initial in briefing, those radio frequencies, but you might meet your division soup out or your group supervisor out in the field or at some meeting point. And then those are what we call tailgate sessions. Or if you guys just have questions to get answered, you might have just a tailgate session out there with the group supervisor, and that happens all day. So basically, it was the planning P. But on the right side is a piece of paper, and it was a schedule of the daily meetings that the command and general staff goes, and it was kind of to plug along with the planning P there to show you guys just some of the different meetings that the command and general staff attend during the day. The planning P meetings were really a minimum, and I'm not up here trying to say justify what command and general staff does while you guys are in the field, but more or less just give you some base knowledge of there's a lot of meetings that take place, and those meetings not only for the IAP to get together and published for you guys out there so that you guys can be successful in your mission, but there's also a lot of meetings with the community, with the agency administrators, different stakeholders, shareholders that the ICs are having to deal with, or the liaisons, depending on what the liaison might encounter. So there's a lot of small meetings going on throughout the day. And these are the times, or in the planning P, where, especially if we marry up with an agency or a landowning agency's team, that's our time to get together and really share our information so that everybody's on the same page. And you can really tell when that's successful, because true integration between the teams is very difficult. And it's like what we talked about earlier on rapid team development. It's rapid team development with two incident management teams coming in, one so that we can help manage the structure assets, but the wildland agencies are out there, maybe where it would be our first assignment of the year, this could be their third or fourth, and so that gets very challenging. And what is really challenging about that is that each team does it a little different, and they have a little different system set up. And so usually it's that collaboration on coming together with a meeting schedule, which is right there, right? But a meeting schedule so everybody can be on the same page and be on time and really show the other team that we're there to help support them, but we're also there for you guys and to put together a solid plan and be productive out there in the field. Just as we talked about, the objectives are established by the ICs. The IAP is a download of information. I really like the look at it, read it, and most important, understand it. I know it's difficult as a task force leader or really even, division soup, crew boss out there on the line is to get that time. That it seems like the only time you really see it, if it's not on your mind, is right at that ops briefing, and you're sitting there listening to the people talk, and they're going through it uniformly, but it seems like after that ops briefing, it's taken and it's wound into a tight paper roll and shoved in your pocket or thrown on the dash of your vehicle, and that's the last you see of it. And that I think is a shame. I hope everybody's taking the opportunity, at least when they get out in the field, to open that up and to read it. It's kind of like the safety message Ron was talking about earlier. It's understanding that safety message, understanding the medical plan, understanding what your division or a group assignment is, and what kind of special instructions are out there. If you don't do it for anybody else, do it for yourself. Do it for your crew, so that if that incident within an incident pops up, that you're able to at least start implementing some type of corrective action and know where to get help.
And it's really important, especially on that incident within an incident, especially medical. Most of us are carrying paramedics and all the equipment that's required. So if we're monitoring the radio, sometime the division's not going to be able to hear that chatter that something's going on the division. We're in a group, we might be in multiple divisions. So if it's in the area and you've been talking to the other task force leaders that are from the wildland side, you guys get that rapport going. They know that you're close by and that you have paramedics and the equipment to treat somebody. And if we don't hear that information, that's something that you guys can self-initiate. Life safety is number one. And so if we can help our people out, we're going to help the partners out, then that's what we need to do. All right, 214s. So again, she talked about it a little bit ago. They're discoverable. That means that anything you write down has your name and your agency information on it and all the nice things that you say about the fire and the people you work with. So turn it in daily to the division soup. As she said, I like the resource unit leader works for me because I don't necessarily read everyone. Sorry. But we have some examples that we got from the fire marshal's office, and some of these are pretty good. So 214 is the good. Pretty descriptive. Times, important things, right? The 3 A's, actions, agreements, and
accidents.
So write all that stuff down. 3 A's, actions, accidents, agreements.
So I think it's important. In the good here, and it'll get kind of funny here once we get some examples or what Mark has seen on some less than desirable 214s. But since we've gone to the manifest this year, the manifest isn't set up like the 214 of the FSP01. So the accountability, remember, or of you guys being there every day is the 214s in the IAP. Okay, so it's really important you write that down, and I know one of the, I'd be lying if I got up here and I said, oh, my IAP or my 214s are excellent. I think that would not pass the straight face test. It gets difficult to fill them out. A lot of times what I'll do is I'll do the white piece of paper and a pen, and I'll just start writing stuff down with times, and then that evening I'll take it and transpose it onto the 214 so it's clean and legible. It's important to take those notes, especially as a task force leader during the day, or even your engine bosses. I know sometimes you guys are spread thin. If the engines are away from you guys, they could have things that are going on that they need to document.
And notes on a piece of paper outside the 214 are really good. I agree with Scott, but make sure that the date maybe is on there somewhere. You get rid of the one from the day before. I've actually had to do a couple 214s because I wrote the same thing twice in a row and I didn't know which day I was on. So,
yeah, it's really easy to get behind in them, but very important. Another thing that I just challenge you guys to do, and that would be on the 214s, because like Mariah said, they are looked at. So please understand that they're important. Is weather observations. I think that's something to remember. If you've, I would hope that everybody is taking weather observations out there, but if you are, and you've got somebody who understands, if they're taking, with the belt weather kit, obviously there's the the documentation tablet in there that you can turn into fire behavior, and the weather folks that help out, but you can also put that in the 214s. That's important, and we'll be able to capture that, and at least if they're not filling out the piece of paper in the belt weather kit, that we can get it to the weather people so that they can look at spot weather forecasts or weather forecasts around the fire. And what else? I think, and this is more of a question. So when I first started, and I haven't done it since, but I'll throw it out there, and somebody will help me if I'm wrong, is so we don't take lunch breaks out there. And so I haven't put lunch breaks in, but also because of our portal to portal, I don't put like off duty, I'll put rest. Can I get some help on that? Is there any clarification on?
Yeah, I like to use backing camp as my
Backing
end time for the 16 hours. Right, backing camp, whether or not I'm done working or not, it's backing camp on the thing, 1800 or 600, right? So you get your 8 hours of rest. We all know that that's not necessarily accurate, but this is important. You look at this one, this is really good. I like this one. It's got the addresses, right? They say what road they're working on, and then it's got the addresses. And it's got house burnt, house, still standing, house gone. Those are really important things, so they can go back, the documentation folks can go back and look at it. Well, that house was here this day, but then the next day it was gone. When did it burn up? We can go back to the operational period, figure out what happened, look at all that stuff. Especially if a homeowner or a landowner comes in and says, I was just by there the other day and my house was fine, and I went back today and it's completely down. So what happened?
All right.
Okay, here's some bad ones. If you have personal issues of pins and stuff like that, don't put it on your 214. 2 lines. This would be my ideal 214, but we can't do it. I would put, went to the fire, came home. But we can't do it. Again, they're documents that go in the box that are our accountability of being there. So you need to have a little bit more than briefing and back at camp. So if you contact the safety officer, put in there why. Again, it goes back to claims and stuff like that. And if there's an accident, injury reports, all that stuff is referenced later back in the fire marshal's office for that kind of stuff. So, okay, so if somebody's staying in place, yeah, just make sure you document, hey, notified the division soup and safety that this person was going to remain at their house. It's okay, we can't make people leave. That's the sheriff's office job. So if they're going to stay, that's fine, just write it down. Again, public document. Now this was fine a few years ago, right, with the FSPO ones. This was what we did, but it's not like that anymore. So I'm guilty of that one for sure. 214 is being sent in with a billing packet. Again, I think the premise here is that it goes in the documentation box and it's public record once it's finished. So,
all right, evaluations and debriefings. So they're required prior to demobilization.
How many people got an eval on every fire they went on last year? I'm not raising my hand because I didn't get one on every fire I went to. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it don't.
So the evaluations should be filled out by your division soups. Like Mark said, in some instances they aren't, or there's something influencing outside of that where you don't get one. But most times, and at least you should get an evaluation done on your task force by your division soup. And I think the important thing is, there's been a lot of discussions about this, and I think as obviously chief officers and company officers in here during evaluation time, it's really important, and it behooves you to be honest and talk to them about some of the areas that they could make changes in. But more importantly, it's an opportunity for you to share with them their successes too, and that's those areas where they could use some improvement. Don't necessarily need to be documented. That's up to you and the working relationship you have with that particular engine boss or the div soup to you. But it should be something that's not left out. What we want is we want there to be honest feedback, for people to improve, for people to get better, and we also want the evaluations to share those successes. And we're all out there, and we volunteered to go out on a mobilization, and we want to do a good job. That's everybody that's out there. Nobody shows up to work saying, I'm going to do a bad job today. But maybe you guys have had some people who actually have. Everybody's out there to do a good job, and so be honest and give them thoughtful feedback is really important.
Yeah, sometimes I think that there's crews out there, and you've all seen them. We're kind of changing, and then if you've been around the fire marshals teams of the past few years versus the past 20 years, there's definitely some differences on what we do now that we used to do in the past. You're not going to find a lot of people sitting in lawn chairs in people's lawns anymore, and I think some folks that come on those still think that's the way we work. And so trying to move past that and get those folks up to speed. Some people are a little bit less receptive than others. And so you can have that conversation a lot of time, but you want to make sure your task force is effective. And that's up to you as a task force leader to make sure that they're doing their job. And if we're having issues with that multiple times, maybe that crew or that agency that's from your county doesn't come back next year. But that's an internal thing that you guys deal with. It's one of those things, we want effective things. It goes back to first impressions. The IC's driving up the road and they see a water tender sitting there with lawn chairs on top of it and the guys are snoozing. Might not leave a good impression for the department names that's on that tender. So,
the debrief with Command and General Staff, this is what Mariah talked about before, is prior to demobilization or demobbing the fire. It's really important for the Fire Marshal's office, the agency rep who's out on the fire with us, and the ICs. It's something that they really want to do, and that's to go around to each task force and say thank you. That gives them an opportunity, because they're usually busy, but an opportunity to come out and say thank you formally to you guys, to your task forces. And so it's something that's not just for show, but it's really kind of that moment that's heartfelt for them, because they don't get to see you guys all the time, or the troops. So yeah, Has anybody not ever gotten a debrief from the command or the IC or anything as they demobbed? Yeah? That's too bad, because I know that they really make it a point to go out there and to talk to everybody. So they try hard to do that. But it's also an opportunity for you guys to say, talk back to or discuss with the IC if you've got any questions. Yeah, not talk
like
back,
talk
but
back.
talk to the ICs and ask any questions, or maybe get the questions answered or asked why and get an answer for those. So the bigger picture, we put this in, and there's a couple different ways that we can talk about it. Initially, what I envisioned is last year was such a good, in the sense of wildland firefighting, year for the state fire marshal, as we saw in the opening comments today. And so really, what's going on with that bigger picture? And I don't know how many of you know, but the bigger picture that we're a part of, and where I'm going with this is, after, at least on the county line fire where our team was deployed, all of a sudden we were deploying resources from our fire. We were demobilizing them and mobilizing them to other fires. So as quick as we were getting done, and in some cases we could have even held on to resources. We could have held on to you guys. We were demobbing you to share you with other incidents. So in the big picture of things, or at least on the wildland side, it's the National Interagency Coordination Center in Boise, Idaho. And at the NICC there, they are in charge of nationally mobilizing resources. So that's everything from food unit trailers to IMTs, and I've got in there internationally once our system's tapped out, but they're all the crews and stuff like that once we get really rolling into fire season. So there's this big umbrella, and I think it would be better if I just kind of went from the NICC. They are able to, like last year when resources got which stretched so thin, they were handling most of the resources and shuffling them from geographic location, and that's where you get the GACC. That's the Geographic Area Coordination Center, and ours is located in Portland, Oregon. for Region 6, and they do that with the regions of fire. Ours is a Region 6, and it covers Oregon and Washington. And out of the GACC, they handle things within the region, so all the mobilizations that are in Oregon and Washington. How we come up through it is obviously the conflagration or the mobilization in the case of the going to the Indian reservation, but Mariah did a great job of explaining how the mobilization process starts from the incident and how it goes to the Fire Defense Board chief and then up. What was happening last year is when things really start, fire season's upon us and resources are stretched thin, is the State Fire Marshal's office has a seat at the table for the GACC, and they're listening in on the conference calls that are going on daily, and they're discussing resources. And if you remember right, the Fire Defense Board chiefs were probably talking to you fire chiefs at your home units saying, hey, what can we get put together? What can we assemble as far as a task force to deploy, or what resources are available that you're willing to give on a department level? And so a lot of that pre-planning is done ahead of time before the incident. And in the sense of, or like last year, things were going so quickly that it was like a constant phone call on what are you willing to send on a mobilization. Likewise, at the AOC, once that request would come in, they fill those requests, and it's done pretty timely. Once the GACC, or the Region 6 Coordination Center, is empty on resources, then they trickle down from NICC. The biggest thing that I want you guys to get out of this is resources. I know we had in our own home unit, we had some single resources out, and it goes along for the task forces. As task force leaders, remember that you guys still work for your home unit. You still have your fire chief unless you're the fire chief, and then you guys are under the Fire Defense Board chief. And so bouncing from incident to incident, while may be fun, still may not be what the fire chief or the Fire Defense Board chief need to happen. And so as the IMT members, or the IMT, the IC says, let's go ahead and let's release these resources back into the system, you guys want to be sure to follow up with your home fire chiefs, your home unit chiefs, and the Fire Defense Board chief, along with of course, the task force, to make sure that everybody can roll from one incident to another. And I think that's really important. I think that's not only important so that you're keeping, say, the members of the task force happy. They either want to be out there or they don't want to be out there, but also it's keeping and closing the loop with the chief officers back at your home unit. Thank you very much for your time, and thank you for being here.